Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is ShailenP.Bhatt. I am the President and CEO of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America. And I'm really excited for a couple of reasons to have this panel. The first thing is we're actually going a little sooner because I think one of the next panelists is trapped at LAX, which is somewhat ironic given where we are. The good news is that we are no longer the panel that stands between you and refreshments. And I know how there is great interest in moving to that event afterwards. So there's a little less pressure as the moderator to show up and make sure that people get there on time. I'm really excited about this topic, this idea of seamless mobility, because we were just actually at the ITS World Congress in Copenhagen, and they had a mass summit, Mobility as a Service. And you know, in Copenhagen, they had an app on the phone that allowed you to ride the autonomous shuttle from the convention center to a train station. You could get on the train, you could rent a bike, you could use any of their mobility services, and it was fantastic and it was easy. And I've worked for 3 governors and 1 president in the United States trying to solve our transportation challenge. And I think at the end of the day, what will make seamless mobility successful is, can we make it easy? Because right now, the reason that people predominantly choose to drive in their car is because it's easy to get up in the morning and pick up your keys and get in your car. And to the extent that technology and transportation can come together and make it just as easy as to take alternatives and to make those alternatives be known, then we'll make it easier. And so we've got a fantastic panel here today. To my left is Raj Kapoor, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for Lyft. We have Jan Leriche, the CEO of Transdev North America. We have Martin McMullen, Director of Connected Journeys with the New Zealand Transit Agency, in New Zealand doing some really fantastic work in this space. And then Emily Warren, who's been around this idea of mobility for a little while now, and is now Director of Public Policy and Public Affairs with Lime. So I thought that the way that we would get this started and kind of give people some perspective was to give our panelists maybe 2 minutes to just kind of give their sense of, from their personal perspective, what this concept of seamless mobility is and how we can make it easy for people. And then we'll open it up to some questions between the panelists, and if there are questions in the audience, you'll have to wave your hand because the lighting here makes it hard for us to see. So maybe we'll start with Emily. From Lime's perspective, how do you see this concept of seamless mobility?
Yeah, I think it's all about creating a package of options that are offered on a service basis that can compete with car ownership, because car ownership is really like a Swiss Army knife. It is something that's so flexible that you can use it for almost any trip type. And any other type of mode, any shared mobility offering, whether it's a bike or it's a scooter or it's a ride-sharing ride or car-sharing trip, those each have their niches. They have limitations and then they have sweet spots. But none of them is quite as flexible as car ownership. And so for all of those shared mobility options to be competitive with car ownership, they need to team up. They need to be found in combination so that they can present a package that is actually compelling to people to make the shift away from owning a car. And I think it means needing redundancy, needing to know that if you choose not to own a car, there is not going to be just one thing that you're relying on as that backup replacement, but maybe an ecosystem of several different things that have the potential to be available for you. Even if one of them fails, there's going to be 2 or 3 other things that are possible. And depending on what you decide to do that day and what the weather might be and whether you end up with a kid with you or not, there's going to be a variety of options that you have. And so mobility as a service can create that package. It can put it all together in one legible interface that removes the cognitive load from people having to navigate all of those different options to make it just as simple as putting the key in your car in your driveway.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point around it is just so easy. And when 42% of our cities are devoted to cars, you're kind of stacking the deck a little bit. Raj, from your perspective, with Lyft and maybe a different take on the car and a different service model, how do we make this easy? How does Lyft see this making it easier for people so that they can choose mobility as a service instead?
Yeah, I mean, since day one, the mission has been about reducing car ownership. I think the huge change in 2018 is that we have really graduated from being a ride-sharing company into being transportation as a service or mobility as a service. We have scooters live. We are in the process of purchasing the largest bike share company in the U.S. We've integrated transit into the application already. And what we're finding is that what a consumer wants is to make the time-money trade-off and then to make the transaction happen, something that's not happening on some of the platforms like Google Maps and others that are there. So we think this is a really interesting point in time where all of this is coming together. We've also transformed from being an app company to now being an infrastructure company. So we have docks in most major cities, which we think are very important, both for scooters going forward as well as for bikes to put it together. There will be points where the AVs come and get picked up and dropped off. So it's about really rewiring every block in a city such that it can support and make it so frictionless and seamless for the consumer. One point was interesting. We launched something called Ditch Your Car. It was supposed to be a little fun thing that we do. We thought a couple thousand people would sign up. 150,000 people signed up to ditch their car. It was amazing. So we just published a video today with BuzzFeed that goes through the life of 30 days of two people from LA. And it just went out today on how they went through this process, kind of like a reality show, and it's 5 minutes long. You should take a look at it. It's funny. But the one interesting thing I found out of that was that they're like, great, ditch your car. We gave them some, we gave them Lyft credits. We gave them bike sharing. We gave them Zipcar, all the things that they could do so they didn't have to have a car. What did they do in the first week? All they did was use rideshare, and they're like, they ran out of credits.
What can compete with the car? The only thing that can compete with the car on a lot of these types of trips is something that offers that same location flexibility. And that's what public transport has never been able to solve for, because public transport inherently is something that requires aggregation of a mass amount of demand along a fixed route on a fixed schedule. And so it is sort of antithetical to the idea of something coming to your doorstep. Now, it's geometry-wise the best damn way to move people down a corridor where there's a density of demand, and it has to be the backbone of our transportation system, but it can't compete with that long tail of use cases for where people need to get from A to B that aren't served by one of those fixed routes. And so ride-sharing taught us that if we want mobility service to be successful as a package of getting people away from cars, we need to, to offer them something on a free-floating basis. But ride-sharing isn't cheap enough for people to use every day. And it's still a car. It still is part of the vehicle travel lane that's congested, right? And so having shared mobility services that can operate on a free-floating basis and offer that location flexibility, but are active transportation, that don't contribute to congestion, that help deliver cities' policy goals with respect to affordability and with respect to eliminating greenhouse gas emissions, was like a missing piece of the puzzle. And so that's what I'm excited about, that Lime has been able to start to bring to the conversation along with others just in the last 18 months, is seeing that when you can offer electric-propelled mobility devices that operate on that same free-floating basis that people learned about with ride-sharing and make it affordable for everyday use, that starts to round out a package of mobility offerings that is an incredibly compelling alternative to a car. But they all need each other, right? Because there are things that bikes and scooters can't do too that ride-sharing is great for, like getting you home on Saturday night after you've been out and had a drink, or taking you in the rain when you're carrying a whole bunch of groceries. So all these different parts kind of come together and create something that is bigger than the sum.
Yeah. Raj, from your perspective, what is the thing that you would want to see most from the public sector in terms of again, getting us towards this vision of a future where it's seamless and it's not just about single occupant vehicle trips.
Yeah, first I would comment that from the consumer perspective, they're speaking pretty loudly and they're speaking pretty quickly. When we're putting new products out there, whether it's shared rides, within several years, shared rides are now 35% of all of Lyft's rides. And when we first did it, people were like, are you going to go with someone you don't know? It was really a new thing. Second, you look at scooters and what's happened there, and we've launched now scooters in 3 cities, and the uptake has been phenomenal. And it's really hitting those trips that are very efficient, that you can do less than 2 miles. And a lot of them are coming in and out of the transit hubs that are there. So the consumer is responding faster. The challenge is the infrastructure of the city and also the rules that are set up for the city. And how do they change to adapt to this? What's the right way to put scooters out there? Is it the right way to allow the market to decide and put them everywhere? Is the right way to put a fixed amount of supply? Lots of things are being discussed right now and trying to figure that out. So I think it's about the consumer demand is pulling, and the cities now have to figure out how do they adjust to that. And I have to say that I think it's happening faster. Cities are moving fast. How quickly they're addressing, for example, scooters. Before, it took years for them to address ride sharing. They're addressing scooters within months and coming up with policies, right or wrong. They're at least putting a shot out to see what they should be doing. So I think we're seeing the public sector that's moving along in this direction. I think the interesting thing that's going to also happen is I spend 99% of my time now on autonomous. And our vision is an autonomous electric shared fleet. It has to be all three. It has to be electric for the environment. It has to be shared, otherwise it's more cars. And autonomous, I believe, will bring the prices down greater than 50% from where they are, so that it will be cheaper, so that you can get more people to move from point A to point B. We could have an hour discussion just around the issues around autonomous and what does the city have to do that. And that's also coming pretty fast. We're now live with the largest program in Las Vegas. We've done 20,000 rides, self-driving between all the hotels, learning a ton about, and it's not just about the person in the car. I remember the head of NACTO told me the real impact is on the citizens of the city, the person that's on the sidewalk that sees an autonomous car coming at them. That's what you have to worry about. So the city is rightfully worrying about the impact around everyone else, not just what's going on in the car.
Yeah, the scooter piece, I rode one at the Detroit Auto Show in January, and I thought, how quaint. And not even a year later, it's not so quaint. It's almost ubiquitous in a lot of cities now. But I had an interesting take. So as a former public sector person, there's this, why aren't you regulating this? And then from the market side, it's a lot of, we want more. And somebody made an interesting observation. They're saying that the scooter and these other options are a market reaction to people not being happy with what government is providing. And so you can regulate, and I think that regulation is a part of it. But the market is sending signals that people want more, and I think this idea of mobility as a service is there. Martin, in New Zealand, how do you balance public desire for regulation with public desire for more options?
I think you've got to start with the approach is what's the customer experience that you're trying to deliver. Think big and start small. So start with small controlled pilots that enable them to happen, and we're doing that with Lime at the moment in Auckland and Christchurch. And for me, the pent-up latent demand around active transport and the e-scooters and the like has been fantastic. You talk about an autonomous vehicle, that's what a scooter is. You're moving yourself, you go and grab it, off you go, and 5 minutes you're there, wherever you need to be. But for me, I think we need to make sure that we don't undermine some of these new safe transport options here. If you think about when the motor vehicle came around, people used to drive motor vehicles around and they used to just ditch them everywhere. And then we decided to put enforcement in and put yellow lines down or red lines and curbside access and the things. It's great that cities are now starting to think about that in the active transport points of view. I think sometimes we're a little bit too quick to want to regulate things. You've got to let it play out and actually get in alongside and collaborate and experiment and learn, like Raj said and said, like they're doing in Las Vegas. is you don't know what you don't know, and regulation and policy takes a long, long time, and you don't want to get it wrong. So the best thing to do is, in a true agile fashion, is learn first, then document it, rather than document it first and then you've usually got it wrong in the first place.
Yeah. I'm just going to take a second here and see if I can see any hands that have a question on mobility as a service or an idea. I actually can't see a damn thing, so it's fantastic. It might be the glare off my head. So if you do have one, if you could just maybe move to the center section. I know that the scooter question got a lot of had a lot of robust audience participation earlier, and I don't want to bog down on that because it's one element of mobility as a service, but one that we're finding is becoming more and more important. Jan, thank you.
Hello, Chelsea Erstner from CityFi. I'm wondering if you think about reaching a point where mobility becomes almost too seamless and people aren't walking. How does walking fit into this and kind of incentivizing that?
So I can make one comment on that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if I may. I think everything that I've seen about my observation of the use of the shared mobility services where I've worked, first at Lyft and now at Lime, is that when people consume mobility as a service, they make more asymmetrical trips. And that's a nerdy way of saying that, when you don't bring your car with you from your driveway, then you don't have to bring it back. And so you're more likely to be spontaneous in your decision making about which modes you're going to choose, which, in my personal experience leads to me deciding to walk a lot of times when I realize, oh, okay, the next place I need to go is within walking distance, but then maybe the place after that or the next trip segment is something that requires some type of service. So I think when you unlock spontaneous choice, which is what mobility as a service does, then you introduce the opportunity for more walking because people don't have to carry around the car as a security blanket with them. But this is something that can be evaluated through data, through travel behavior research. It's important to me at Lime to make sure that the claims that we make about our impacts aren't just speculative or spin, but they're based in science. And I have a policy research team that I hired, where I hired a travel behavior researcher to come in, and we work with the cities where we operate to conduct travel behavior surveys on our riders and share that data with the cities so that they can actually track these kinds of impacts and then make policy decisions about that, because certainly the goal should be in every city to increase the frequency of walking.
Yeah, one thing I was going to mention is that we've actually now correlated economics to walking. And what I mean by that is that we're introducing, if you walk more, you can get a cheaper ride, because in the way that shared rides works is that you can get more density, less time going off a detour if several people are walking to the ride. And we can actually save money, and you end up paying the driver the same amount. And so we're seeing a real response in a positive way towards that of, oh, can you just walk 5 minutes and you can save 20% off your ride. So I think that's going in the positive direction.
Great points. Thanks.
I just love the concept of too seamless of mobility. I think I had never considered that. So that's a great way to look at it. Is there another question there?
Hi everyone, my name is Chiamaka from SFMTA. So this question is actually for Raj at Lyft. So you mentioned that for you a sustainable future in terms of your product is it's electric, it's autonomous, it's shared. But I'm wondering how you all at Lyft are thinking about the transition in our fleet from the current one that we have that I guess isn't autonomous to that future autonomous fleet, and how the emissions intensivity of that transition will be managed. Because it seems like it would be very emissions intensive to completely transition our car fleet.
Was it about emissions or just in general the transition? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear fully.
Specifically emissions.
Oh, emissions.
And transitioning our car fleet.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. We're not going to wait for the entire fleet to go autonomous before we address electric. So we have a program right now that's called Express Drive, where we are providing vehicles to drivers, because 50% of the people that want to drive for Lyft don't, because they don't have the proper vehicle, or they just don't want to use their vehicle. And this has been a very successful program. We're helping them on the rent as long as they commit to doing some volume on Lyft. And what we're doing now is introducing the electric option, which usually people are very worried about because there's a high upfront cost, range anxiety, especially if you're a Lyft driver. Charging time means time off the road means you're not making money. But we know where they need to do it and what the downtimes are, and so we're working on getting that ecosystem going so that it is much more seamless for drivers today to drive electric. And once we do it for our fleet, it's something that we can open up for drivers that have their own electric car that are bringing out to it. So I think that's going to be really important. And what we're finding is certainly from a fuel perspective, they're going to save money. And you can, and if we can just get that vehicle cost down, and if you can do some of that through some federal rebates and state rebates, you can start to really get to the economic point where it makes more sense for a driver to go electric than it does for them to be in gas. And that's what we're really working hard towards before the autonomous.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify my question. I'm actually referencing car manufacturing itself. Not whether or not the cars are, like the cars running on fossil fuels or electricity, but actually the new cars that will be produced in order to have this autonomous fleet that you see in the future.
So is the question whether or not the new autonomous fleet will be electric or not?
Oh no, it's reference. You can go ahead.
I think it's the emissions that are created by them.
Oh, the emissions created by the manufacturing of those. That's a good question. I don't think we've dug that deep into the value chain as Lyft, but it's a very good question.
And I think that it's important. I mean, there are 300 million vehicles in the U.S. fleet. It turns over about 15 million vehicles a year. I agree. I think that the future needs to be electric. From a concept of seamless mobility, I think that to the extent that we can say that there is a smaller carbon footprint, I think that is another value add for folks to say, let me ditch my own personal vehicle ownership. I think that's an important component. Jan, did you have something that you wanted to weigh in there?
No, I wanted to react because in public transport, I mean, of course, we face the same questions and should it go to electric fleets of buses? The answer is that without any specific public subsidies, it's very complicated. Still today, it's more expensive. I mean, the cost of an electric bus is the double of a standard bus. Cost is changing quite fast. I mean, the prices are decreasing, but we are not yet exactly, at break even after a few years. So it's changing fast, but we cannot claim today that it is the same. So it will take a few more years. I mean, we have the chance here also to work in some countries where there is a lot of public money to help that transition, but only private money. This will not happen in the next months, for sure.
Yeah. I spoke at the Beijing Auto Forum this year, and they're deploying electric buses, a fleet the size of London's every month, and it's actually going to depress global oil output next year. So I think there's a general move to this. Is there another question back there?
Hey, Paul Salama at Clear Road. Question on pricing. Emily, maybe, or someone mentioned, well, I guess this regulation is happening so quickly on the scooter segment, and it's certainly catching up on the ride-hailing side. It seems like we're moving towards these new mobility options bearing the brunt of the experimentation and congestion pricing. And so I'm just wondering what you guys are thinking about that and how you're going to respond, perhaps, maybe.
Yeah, I think pricing is a very underexploited tool by government for shaping consumer behavior toward policy outcomes. And we know why. It's politically difficult to charge the public for things that they're used to getting for free. And we have a transportation system that has massively subsidized driving. And so anything that helps to correct for that modal choice, the dominance of car use as a modal choice, is going to result in the imposition of additional costs on people who choose that mode. And so it's been difficult for public elected officials to be willing to do. I think there is certainly an opportunity as we shift more towards service-based business models for pricing to be introduced, because people are getting used to paying on a per-use basis for these services. But we have to be really careful that we don't do that to the detriment of the adoption of shared mobility as a whole, right? And throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think there's been some tendency in that direction recently, which isn't constructive. It's always important, I think, for public officials to step up to the plate, and for shared mobility companies to the extent they can to help rally the public supporters who are willing to provide political backing for that, to include cars in the equation and make sure that any policy decisions that start imposing a pricing regime are including single occupancy vehicles and personally owned vehicles in that regime. But every mode should be part of it. And the goal should be to shape behavior toward the types of modal choices that will have the optimal outcomes for the city.
So are you pursuing an educational campaign for government officials?
I think I've been on a several-year educational campaign encouraging congestion pricing, but I'm happy to do that at any juncture.
Emily, that's my favorite term I've heard today. Pricing is underexploited by governments. That is a true statement. I also think that what is something to kind of keep in mind here too is mobility as a service is a really important urban consideration, but in a lot of urban areas, people are being priced out of being able to live in those places, and so I think one component of this is now you're going to, they moved out because that's where they can afford to live, and now you're going to say that they can't drive their kids to the school that's in there or get to their job. It's just a really difficult consideration. Jan, what are some of the global examples that you can point to of folks who are maybe getting it right or making a real effort here?
If I had one country to pick, I would choose Finland. I believe that this is the one who made, the most efforts to transform mobility as a service or seamless mobility from slides to real services. 3 years ago, their Ministry of Transportation and Communication, Madame Berner, she wanted to make the country the leader in the world of mass. So what did she do? She gathered 20 experts from all over the world, and it was the chance to be one of them. And she asked the question, what should we do? What should we change to make sure that, again, this becomes a reality and that everyone in the country can go from A to B in a seamless manner using many modes of transportation. And one of the key outcomes of this working group is that they changed their regulation a few months ago. They have now a new code of transportation, and they take 6 decisions, which are 6 new articles in that code. The first one, very key one, they introduced a new concept of essential data. They have said for some data regarding transportation should be shared with everyone, whether you are a private or a public operator of transportation services. Those essential data, so it's about pricing, it's about stops, it's about availability of services. I mean, there is a long list. All of this has to be shared, one. Second, all the booking and ticketing platform of all operators should be open with an API. So directly, so not with the provider's interface, but directly to the booking system so that others can sell tickets and trips. Third, all mass providers should also make their technology interoperable, meaning that if one city, Helsinki, for example, develop a local mass service, it should be interoperable with another mass services in the country so that it can become a global mass. And one key idea also in that is that the personal data of the people, for example, my rights, let's imagine that I am unemployed and I can travel, I don't know, with a reduction in my price of 50%. Somebody will own my data and will know that, and that data should be shared with everyone so that I shouldn't enter each time, my own, profile in the system to make it seamless. The 3 other articles are a bit less interesting. It's about, APIs, how they should be open for safety reasons. They should be open in a fair, reasonable manner, non-discriminatory manner also. There was one article, the number 5, about making sure that all public procurement of the country respect the first article, so that everybody, each time there is public money involved in a new transportation mode or in the existing one, all what I said before is respected. And the last article is about ITS in Europe. As you might know, there is a global coordination to make sure, for example, that when you have a GPS in your car, it will work from one country to the next one. So here also it's compliant with other EU regulation. But if you just stop on the three first ones, that's also already a revolution that everyone, every private company, public company, or a mix of them has to open, a set of data and to open all their booking interfaces. That is making a change. And you might know the startup WIM, one of the leaders in mass. It's not, the fact that they are from Helsinki, Finland, is just not by chance. It's because, the ecosystem was ready for that there.
Is there another question?
Yeah, my name is Matthew Grachik. I'm with Terradynamics, and I have a question for the panel, but maybe Martin would be the person to start with. I'm wondering how you see air taxis getting incorporated into that ecosystem that you're talking about, if at all. What's the time horizon? I ask Martin especially because I know that New Zealand is progressive in that area. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We see them as another mobility choice for customers to consume. Obviously, the financial integration of it is relatively straightforward. But in that aerial mobility at the moment, we have multiple companies in New Zealand testing platforms, i.e. the endpoints, the vehicles. What we're starting to think about now is the operating system that they'll play into. Some of them are looking at operating less than 1,000 feet above sea level, or above the ground. We're going to need some sort of connectivity platform there to allow the command and control to safely move these devices in and around our urban environments within digital corridors. It's something that's definitely very much on our radar. And I think you'll start that we are looking at some use cases for in and around America's Cup in 2021, when New Zealand will retain the cup.
Good product placement.
Let's get it in. But we'll see how those goes. It's very early days, but a lot of people working on it.
So in the interest of time, I think we're coming towards the end. We're going to have the ITS World Congress in LA in 2020, and a couple of things that we're already talking about: a demonstration of flying passenger delivery. But one of the things we're really excited about is a mobility on demand application, so that just like we did in Copenhagen, people who come from around the world to LA in 2020 can just have this one sort of seamless opportunity. So just as a quick lightning round to end this out, and I'll let you go first, Emily, but let me just set this up. How far away are we in the United States from this concept of seamless mobility, and what is one very quick thing that you think would be the best thing that we should focus on in order to make it happen?
I think we're very close. So I would say 1 year. I mean, there are public transit agencies that are ready now, and clearly the private sector is ready to offer the rest of the package. So this is going to happen. It's probably already there, and we just haven't tried it yet. But please, city that has it, tell me. And one thing, I mean, I know it's nerdy, but I think that getting transit agencies to be able to offer payment integration with shared mobility operators is one thing that would be really catalytic in making this happen. And I'll squeeze out a second, which is maintaining a competitive marketplace for shared mobility operators. Because I think the one thing that could really kill this is if government gets really worried about mass, meaning monopoly control of transportation. And so as long as we keep competition among the marketplace of mass offerings, then I think we can retain a vibrant market and prevent sort of those barriers from holding us back from achieving its potential.
Yeah, I think we're there today. We've got scooters, bikes, and ride-sharing integrated, and walking, which is really important as well. And the only thing that's missing, as Emily pointed out, was transit payment integration into our solution today. But I also am not sure that's going to hold people back, because a lot of them have stored value cards they're using every day anyway. So I don't think that's the big inhibitor. So I just think you're just going to start seeing it happen. I think a lot of it is the consumer habit and their perception that it's a very complicated, long time to switch modes. It's hard. And so I think we need to change that perception.
Yeah, I agree. The vertical integrations there today across the different operators. The one for me is when you can go horizontally. So rather than just having to go into Lyft and then go through Uber or go through Lime, it's actually how you look at it from a transit lens point of view, and then look across those three verticals. I think that'll take a little bit more work.
I mean, there is no black and white answer to your question, because when we speak about mass mobility as a service, actually there is no precise definition. It's about multimodal trip planning, and this already exists. It's about payment. This integrated payment doesn't really exist today, but will come, and then other services. So I won't answer to your question, but I will finish by a bet, which is that next year here, the next topic that we will discuss when we will speak about mobility as a service will be algorithmic mobility. Because the day there will be mass products, and several of them in competition on the same, city, territory, or state, or whatever, one question will be, yes, but what purpose do they serve? If I know, for example, that you have enough money to go into a black car, not share, to go from A to B, if I am your mobility provider, and if I am only a private company without any regulation, I might push for you, because I know you with all the data that I collect from you, offerings that might not be the best for the city. Here we are speaking about, congestion, about, all that kind of good outcome of mass for the city, but actually it might be worse if, thanks to the data collected, we take advantage of this to make more money and not to serve the public good. So algorithmic mobility will be the topic that will be discussed. How do we ensure that all of this really serve the purpose of improving accessibility in the different territories where those services are in place?
Yeah, and I think it's about making it easy, but also making it about a good outcome and measuring outcomes. So can we have a round of applause for this panel? It's been a really good